Hey everybody, I want to show you another awesome deck you can use now in Standard. Aetherworks Marvel was just banned, and now we have the ability to play a lot of really cool mid-range decks, and we don't have to worry about Ulamogs on turn 4 and all that nonsense. So what we have in front of us is an Abzan mid-range junk deck, and for those of you who aren't familiar with junk decks, maybe you're, just play Standard or, new to the game, don't really play Modern or Legacy or anything. Basically what it is, it's a mid-range creature deck that doesn't necessarily have a lot of synergy like you would see with, a tribal deck like the zombies decks in the format and stuff. It's just basically a mashup of all the best resilient threats and overpowered creature and removal that you have in this particular color combination, and it becomes extremely powerful. It's can play kind of a control route and can go semi-aggro, but we can get a lot of value out of these cards. So let me quickly go over it and hope you enjoy it. So first off, we have a playset of Bone Picker, and Bone Picker is an extremely underrated card in the format right now. I haven't seen a lot of people playing it. I'm not too sure why. The main decks that you're going to go up against in the current meta, other than zombies, is a lot of energy decks, whether it be Teamer or Jund. And then there's also the blue-red kind of burn control / deck that uses like the Drakes and Downable Towers and stuff like that. And then also you're having a lot of Gearhulk decks. So this definitely has its place. It works like Delver of the Secrets in the sense that you can kind of cheat it in on mana, pretty much play it for a single black, and you can get it down on turn 2 pretty consistently, especially with Fatal Push. And then also we can use Walking Ballista if we have to kind of cheat it into play. So it creates a 3-power clock, and that can be extremely devastating to a lot of board states, not to mention Death Touch just puts it over the top. Next we have Grimflayer, which has turned into pretty much an eternal staple at this point. And now that the decks kind of are slowing down and we have an opportunity to play creatures like this, Delirium's extremely easy to achieve in this deck, probably faster than anything else I've played in recent memory. So it's just a huge 4/4 body. It gives you card advantage. You can filter through the top of your deck. It's got trample. There's no reason for us not to play a full playset of this. Next, we're running 2 Sigarda, which is going to give us Hexproof, and then also the creatures that we're using. With the absence of Walking Ballista and Bone Picker, everything else is a human, so it can give them Hexproof as well. A lot of Gearhulk decks, a lot of blue-red decks, so Hexproof is definitely big time right now. Big time. And if that isn't relevant, at least this is going to be a primary focus for your opponent to have to remove. They're going to have to waste a lot of resources and attention to get rid of this 4-power flying body. Next, we have 2 Tireless Tracker, which has obviously proved itself over many recent Standard seasons, generates card advantage, grows bigger as the game goes on. Yet again, a threat that your opponent pretty much has to answer right away, or it's going to be a continuous problem. And then lastly, in the creatures, we have a full playset of Walking Ballista. Now, let me take a second to talk about this card. I wasn't immediately on board with it when it was first spoiled and first coming out. It took me kind of a minute to wrap my head around why it was so good. And actually, I played in modern Eldrazi-tron decks, and I was just blown away. I mean, it's removal. It's a burn spell. It can be all kinds of things. It can trigger Delirium Force by being basically 2, both an artifact and a creature. You play it for 0, sack it, trigger Revolt. I mean, it can grow into a large body if you need just something to dump mana into. It's all around fantastic card. Zero reason not to play it. I think more decks should honestly be playing this in Standard right now, because it can fit into any build. Whether you be control or aggro or mid-range, it has its place. Okay, so let's go over removal, and we have a serious amount of removal, like almost maybe too much removal, but that's the whole game plan here. We're going to start with a playset of Fatal Push, and you can trigger Revolt pretty easily. We need a full 4 because the way this synergizes with Bone Picker is just, it's very important to try to get this as most often as possible. That's going to take care of all our small creatures, all of our Servant of the Conduit, all our Long Tusk Cups. We'll take Brawlers, things like that, that all these decks can be playing early game. Then we're going to have Never Return. Now, this is going to deal with all of our larger creature threats, or Avacens, our Torrential Gearhulks, all that kind of stuff, Kalatas, you name it. And also it can get rid of Planeswalkers, which is another huge benefit. It is sorcery speed, which is a bit of a drag, but, it does make up for that later by being another mana sink where we can create a token if needed. Next to that, we do have Exile effects, which is going to be 2 Declaration in Stone, which with the zombie builds deck, and I've also noticed a huge influx of metallurgic summonings decks kind of coming out of nowhere, so keep an eye out on those. They're actually pretty darn powerful, and we should likely do a deck tech of those soon on the channel as well. This can wipe out those tokens, and we really don't care about giving them the clue because we have so many other ways to create a card advantage, especially in a green build. The amount of card advantage that we can get here is kind of insane. Next, we have 2 Anguish Unmaking and then 3 Cast Out. Now, Cast Out works in 2 ways. One, it can get rid of pretty much anything, but it offers card advantage, and then also the single cycling, putting an enchantment in our graveyard is another way to trigger Delirium for the Grim player. So added benefit there. And then Anguish Unmaking, instant speed, get rid of anything. Planeswalker, creature, enchantment, you name it. Solves pretty much any problem. We don't care about losing the 3 life. Lastly, for basically win condition threats, we do have 2 Gideon because this deck has white, and we're going to play Gideon because he is ridiculously overpowered. And then lastly, 1 Soren. Now, Soren sticks with the theme, like you're seeing with Grimflayer, with Tireless Tracker, with Cast Out, like all these cards in the deck that can generate card advantage while also doing damage. So that's pretty important. And we do get some life gain out of him, which can be good. Because we are going to kill ourselves a little bit life total wise with Anguish Unmaking, and then also with Painful Truce. Now, Painful Truce is the last spell in the deck. We're running a full 3 of it, and the reason there's 3, which might seem like a lot, isn't because we actually intend to play 3 copies of it, like Converge for 3 and do 9 damage to ourselves, draw 9 cards. That's not the game plan. I just really want to make sure we draw at least 1 copy at some point in the game for some type of hand refill. That's just extremely important, so I don't want to miss that. It's really important to our late game plan, so we need to have a full 3 to ensure that that happens. Mana base, pretty straightforward, just a 3-color mana base. The only thing worth mentioning is we do have 3 Evolving Wilds to trigger Delirium, also to trigger Revolt, and then we do have my opinion, the best man lands you can have in the current standard meta, which is 2 Hissing Quagmire and then 2 Shambling Vents. So you have both Death Touch with the Hissing Quagmire and the Bone Picker, and then Shambling Vents, another way to gain some life back, which we may need to use for our Painful Truce or for our Anguish Unmaking. Okay, so moving on to the sideboard. The current standard is a bit in flux with Marvel being banned, so we have to kind of see what happens here. So the sideboard might change slightly, but I think I have a pretty clear picture of what's about to occur. So we're going to have 2 Call-Tosses. We're going to deal with our Recursive Threats, so Scrappy Scrounger, Dread Wanderer, all the stuff in the Zombies tokens build. So that's going to be important for us there, just to make sure that stuff gets exiled, and then once again life leak can be relevant, but that's not the primary purpose. It's just to exile our opponent's creatures. Now, speaking in that same fashion, we have our own set of Recursive Threats with 3 Scrap Heap Scrounger in the sideboard, which we can bring in against control matchups. Now, we do have a lot of removal that we're likely going to get rid of in that particular matchup. Like, we just don't need as much removal. So that's when Scrap Heap is going to come in against those particular matches, like the blue-red one or the Torrential Gearhulk list. Lastly, with creatures in the sideboard, we have 2 Thalia, which can slow people's clock. It is also a human, worth mentioning, so it can gain Hexproof off the Sigarda. But once again, all these tokens build zombies or the Metallurgic Summonings decks. And then also the energy decks tend to go pretty wide, and they're trying to get at least 1 to 2 creatures down per turn. This can really slow the clock, so worth mentioning. Also, non-basic land coming in tap can be huge because those decks are also running like 4 Aether Hub, and they really have almost no like basic lands in the deck. So even that alone can really just put a damper on their game plan. Okay, so moving on to Sorceries, which we have 2 Dispossess. Only purpose for this is for Torrential Gearhulk. It's extremely prevalent in the meta, so we need a way to just remove it. There are some other artifacts that we could potentially grab, but that's its main purpose here. And then also for artifact removal, 3 Fragmentize, which was extremely important for all sideboards that had white with Aetherworks Marvel, but now that's out of the format. This potentially could change into something else. Maybe some more hand disruption is likely what this is going to turn into. But for now, we'll just leave this here and see how it goes. And then we have 3 Transgress the Mind, which is going to come in against any type of control or non-heavy aggro-based matchup where we will likely swap out your Fatal Push. So there's so much removal main board. If we're going to go against, say, like, I don't know, Jeskai or Grixis Control or something, we'll pull the Fatal Push out, bring in the Transgress, and then we'll also bring in the Scrap Heap Scrounger, taking out Deck and Stone as well. The only real removal we'll leave would be Anguish Unmaking and Cast Out, which we can use just to draw cards, and then we'll leave these in to get rid of their finisher threats like Torrential Gear Hulk or anything of that nature. So that's pretty much the deck here. So far, been pretty successful running it online. A lot of people aren't too sure what I'm playing. I haven't seen a lot of Abzan lists out there, so that alone has been pretty good because it's been a bit, opponents can't really predict what my moves are, and they're making a lot of mistakes against it. So it's been going fine up against the energy decks. The blue-red decks tend to be a little bit of a challenge. Zombies hasn't been any problem. We can go toe-to-toe with that. Even though they can go a lot wider, all of our threats are a lot bigger, and then we do have Death Touch available and just an absurd amount of removal. So it tends to be a good matchup for us. So hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or you want to see any other deck techs coming up, feel free to reach out, and thanks.